Hello, good afternoon ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this first lecture of the Poly You and You online lecture series. This is Angela Ze, representing the Department of English to give you the first talk today. I'm very excited because actually we have a lot of participants today, and according to our registration record, we have about 800 participants today. So I believe that you're going to make this presentation even more interesting and interactive. And I would like to particularly welcome secondary school students, teachers and parents. And I hope that in the coming 30 minutes or so, you're going to understand more about PolyU and the Department of English in particular. Now, as all of you know, the talk of today is entitled Be a Fashionable Pop Word User. Pop, of course, it means popular, P-O-P, popular, as in popular music. And of course, when I talk about popular music, a lot of young people listening to this live broadcast should think about K-pop, which is Korean pop music. I was less lucky when I was young. In my generation, we did not have K-pop, but we had J-pop. Perhaps some parents here listening to this live broadcast should know. J-pop means Japanese pop music. All right, so based on this topic, we're going to cover two items together. We're going to cover two items together. The first one is we're going to look at the features of fashionable language based on local Cantonese fashionable expressions and also international English fashionable expression based on Oxford dictionaries. And this part, I do rely on your participation and support, because I'll have some interactive activities for you. I'll ask some questions, I'll do a survey. I will also have, try to get suggestions from you as well. So I hope that you're going to participate actively in these activities. Don't worry, I'll guide you through. And then after this section about features of fashionable expressions, I'm also going to talk about the driving force behind this language fashion. And we're going to focus on what and who is behind the language fashion. So I'm ready, and I guess you are ready too. So let's do it. So first of all, let's talk about Hong Kong local Cantonese fashionable expressions. Have you seen these two images before? Now actually these two images are the two boxes of picture cards, as you can see on the screen. Picture cards or flashcards of trend expressions of Hong Kong Cantonese. So now, I particularly would like to invite you to notice the years of release of these two boxes of cards. The first one was released in 2008, and the second one on the right in green was released in 2009. I'd like you to remember these 2 years, and we're going to get back to them afterwards. Now, let's look at what's inside, and I'm going to show you some samples. This is one of the sample flashcards which you can find in the two boxes of flashcards. Now, first of all, in the image on the right, you can see one fashionable expressions in Cantonese or Chinese. And under that, you can also see its phonological transcription. So if you don't speak Cantonese, and of course I know that some of the participants don't, you can also read this word yourself. And this word, for example, is pronounced as toe. All right. Now, and then on the other side of the card, you can see this expression again, and then you can see some other information, including the Chinese and English meanings of this expression or this term. And at the bottom, you can also see 1 to 2 sample sentences showing you how you can use this expression in your daily conversation. Now, I'm sure that if you speak Cantonese, you're quite familiar with this one because it is extremely popular, and it was popular and still we are using it quite often. Now, what about other examples? Here, I'd like to show you 5 more examples of cards where you can find in those two boxes. Now, once again, we don't have time is short today. We just have about 30 minutes, so I can't really give you explanation of all these expressions, but perhaps at least I can read them out for you so that you can, if you don't speak Cantonese, you can still pick some words up. Next time when you visit Hong Kong, you can also say some of them to Hong Kong people. Now, from the left to the right, the first one is ta zhe. The second one is what gay. The one in the middle with the two ladies is hair. And obviously, H, E, and A do not form a Chinese word. And this is exactly the culture of Hong Kong, the language culture of Hong Kong. We code mix a lot between Cantonese and English. And the next one is sun cap. And the last one is ojo. And once again, O is definitely not a Cantonese word, and it is an English character, so we code switch a lot, as I mentioned. Now, I guess young people, particular, and all of you who speak Cantonese must be able to understand all these terms, and perhaps if you're very familiar with them, you may still be using them. Now, I would like to return to the previous point about the 2 years. Remember, these 6 picture cards are included in the 2 boxes of flashcards of trend expressions in Hong Kong Cantonese 12 or 11 years ago, 2008 and 2009. And remember these 2 years, and I would like you to think about the following 2 questions. The first question is, I want you to ask yourself, or maybe you can discuss with your friends watching this live broadcast with you. Are you still using them now this year in 2020? And the second question, are they still considered as fashionable expressions in Hong Kong this year in 2020? When you're thinking about that, I can give you my quick answers to these 2 questions. My answer to the first one is yes, we are still using them a lot in Hong Kong. I am using them, my students, my friends are all using them. And for the second one, my quick answer would be no, they are no longer fashionable. So these 2 answers, yes to the first one, we are using them, and no to the second one, which means they are not fashionable, is exactly the third feature of fashionable language. Now, language fashion, or the popularity of language, is like all other types of fashion. Language fashion is short-lived. It does not last long. However, the effect on the whole language system, on vocabulary, is longer lasting. They have already entered our natural conversation, and that is why, even after they're out of fashion, they are still commonly used. Like those 6 items, those 6 expressions, which were very fashionable 12 years ago, and now they are out of fashion, but we are still using them. So this is the first feature of fashionable expression. Now, after this warm-up discussion, I would like to invite you to participate in our first activity, which is a survey. Now, as you can see on the screen, there are 5 choices for you. And I would like you to look at these 5 choices from A to E and to choose one of them to be the most fashionable expressions in Hong Kong last year. Now try to think about the situation last year, or maybe think about the society in Hong Kong last year, and choose and vote for the most fashionable expression in Hong Kong 2019. Now A is fact-checked. B, TG, C, masks, D, Gayao, and E, Greater Bay Area. Now, just in case not all of you understand Cantonese or Chinese, actually this is not Chinese, of course it's English, but it's extremely, very local, very Hong Kong, I would say, expressions. So fact check actually is a process or action, action verifying the accuracy of information. This is fact check. And B, TG, is a short form for tear gas, where you can find this term can be found in a lot of social media and news report last year. And mask, of course, is what we are wearing. I'm wearing now, and I have to wash my hands after touching my mask. So you know what a mask is, even you're not from Hong Kong. And then D, Gayo, is actually a very common Cantonese expression. It is an expression of encouragement, and it can be literally translated into English as add oil. This is sometimes, something that we say as well. And lastly, E, Greater Bay Area, is a part of China, which is close to Hong Kong, and the Chinese government is running a lot of projects there. And sometimes people call it GBA. Now, we have a lot of answers here. Isn't it? We have a lot of responses here. Great. Now, let's see. We have a lot of A's and B's and E as well. Right. A, we have a lot of A's. Ooh, A and B as well. So, well, I give you 5 more seconds to answer this question. You just need to key in the letter or the word into the live event chat room. And then we can see your answer, and my colleagues are helping me collect the answers. Right. Okay. Ooh. Now 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, all right, I have to close the survey because time is running short, but you can still, key in the last answers. It seems to me that most of you in this chat room are choosing A and B as the most fashionable or popular expressions in Hong Kong last year. Now, I'm very sure that when you were considering the answer, when you are making your choices, you were thinking about what happened last year, or maybe the conversation between you and your friends last year as well, and perhaps what you read on social media, in the news, etc. So this is something that we're going to discuss afterwards. Now, let's move out of, thank you for your response. We have a lot of response, really. Thank you. And then now let's move out of Hong Kong because I know the borders are closed, but let's virtually leave Hong Kong now and to look at fashionable language worldwide based on Oxford dictionaries. Yeah, now, so we're going to look at Oxford Word of the Year, which is all words of the year in English or something related to English, and we're going to look at the international perspective of looking at fashionable language. Now, perhaps I should give you some features or properties of Oxford Word of the Year. It has to be a word or an expression. It doesn't have to be a word, but just an expression that has attracted a great deal of interest over the last 12 months. It means it has to be extremely popular in past year. This is the first property. And the second property is that the Oxford Word of the Year has to reflect the ethos, mood, or preoccupations of the passing year, that means the past 12 months, and it must have lasting potential with cultural significance. This is a very important point regarding the Oxford Word of the Year and also fashionable expression, which is that this expression has to be very popular and commonly used, and then it must carry social and cultural importance. It has to reflect social phenomenon and cultural phenomena. Yeah, so these are the features. And based on these features, let's look at the past 10 words of the year, Oxford Words of the Year here in this table. Now, we actually can see that from the Oxford Words of the Year or expressions of the year from 2010 to 2018, and I'm actually hiding the one in 2019 because it's another game for you to join. Now, of course, some of you may be smiling because you must be familiar with some of them. For example, the word of the year in 2013 was selfie. I have already taken some before this online lecture, so maybe you have taken some already. So it is something that we are doing. We may not be using this word every day, but we're still doing it. We are still making selfies. And what about the word of the year or the expression of the year in 2015? This is a very cute emoji, and I think I have used it 20 times already, maybe 10 of them in one text actually. Now, Oxford Dictionary translates this emoji into face with tears of joy. All right. So now it is such a breakthrough for Oxford dictionaries, which is usually considered as very careful in terms of the dictionary entries and quite traditional in terms of English. But they picked this emoji, face with tears of joy, as the word of the year. So it was extremely popular. And once again, this emoji, even it is not considered as trendy or fashionable now, is still widely used. If you don't believe it, just open your WhatsApp conversations and count how many you have already used and received today. Now, and based on this table, we can also summarize 4 more features of fashionable expressions. First, let me write it here right. The first one is that it is a quick and easy one. The word of the year, it is just a name, but it actually can be an expression having more than one word. So it doesn't have to be a one-word expression. For example, in 2011, we had squeezed middle. And then in 2010, we had a big society. So it doesn't have to be a one-word expression. It can be 2 words or even a phrase. And later on, we'll talk about that. And the next feature is that it doesn't have to be a totally new word. And I have to say, most fashionable expressions, or particularly the word of the year, are not new words. But then actually these old words, for example, the word of the year in 2018 is toxic. Toxic is not a new word at all. And actually I did a research. It has a 400-year of history. The first use was found in the 17th century. So obviously it's not a new word, but it gained extremely high popularity in the year 2018. So it doesn't have to be a totally new word. But at the same time, the word of the year can be a totally invented, innovative word, and it doesn't even have to be a word in the dictionary. For example, in 2010, the American word of the year is refugiate. How does it mean? You can't find this word in a proper, formal, renowned dictionary. You can't find this in Oxford Dictionary, not in Cambridge Dictionary. Maybe you can find in some, colloquial urban dictionary online. But how does it mean by this word? And actually, this word is a combination of 2 words, which are refute and repudiate, and that is why it's refugiate, used by an American politician in 2010. So once again, this word shows us that fashionable expressions does not have to be a real word. And of course, the last feature can be shown in this breakthrough in Oxford Dictionary, which is that it doesn't have to be a word, and it doesn't even need to have spelling or written form. This emoji, which carries very deep meaning, expressing our feeling, it is not even a word, I would say. It is an expression. So once again, language is for communication. Whatever we use, for example, we're using words, we're even singing, using music or emoji or gesture. Anyway, we're expressing our feeling and communication is done. So this is the 4th feature. Now, after looking at the 4 features based on the Oxford Word of the Year in the past 9 to 10 years, let's look at the Oxford Word of the Year 2019, which is hidden now. Don't Google it. Don't Google it. Put down your phones. And then it is a question, my second activity. Now, I have the answer, of course. That's why I'm asking not to Google it. There are 5 choices for you. And actually, these 5 choices are to confuse you, basically. Now, which one of these 5 options was chosen for Oxford Dictionary as the word of the year? All right, now, A, climate emergency. B, the whistleblowers. C, the Hong Kong protesters. D, exonerate. And E, how dare you? Now, I'll give you some time to think about it, but maybe I can give you some background. These 5 options are very confusing because I can tell you all of them were very famous last year. Even the losers, I would say, of the word of the year, even they were not chosen by Oxford Dictionaries as a word of the year, they have other recognitions as well, but I'll talk about them later. Now, remember, we have left Hong Kong already. We are not just talking about Cantonese now. We're talking about international English fashionable expression. That is why, of course, the incidence in Hong Kong was actually quite well known worldwide, I would say. But besides Hong Kong, let's think about the general phenomenon discussed and experienced by most people in the world, not only Hong Kong. Now, I'm not giving you a tip, but maybe that is a tip as well. But think about the world. Think about what people are always talking about, or some important names suddenly popped up last year. Think about that, and let's see. We have a lot of A's. We have C's, or quite a lot of C's. Yep. We have E as well. We have E. Now, it seems that, well, we have some A's at the beginning, but C and E are now leading this game, and one of you typed, 10 E's there. All right, okay. So E. Now, I give you 5 more seconds to enter the answer, and my colleagues are helping me collect your response. 5, 4, and we have quite a lot of B's now. 3, 2, 1. Now, let me give you the answer. It could be disappointing to some of you perhaps because it seems that C and E are the most popular one, but some of you also chose A, and the answer is ta-da! A, climate emergency. Right now, why was it so popular and so fashionable? Why? Let's look at the definition of this term first, and I am going to show you how fashionable and how popular it was last year. Now, climate emergency is defined as a situation in which urgent action is required to reduce or halt climate change and avoid potentially irreversible environmental damage resulting from it. It's about global warming, it's about climate change, and it's about environmental friendly actions, basically. Now, when I talk about climate emergency, definitely at least one name pops up in your mind, which is, which one? Greta Thunberg. Yes, basically, well, and that is why if you are choosing E, you are having the same line of thought already, because how dare you, obviously, as one of the famous quotes by Greta Thunberg in one of her speeches to international leaders about global warming and climate change. So you're not entirely wrong, but it wasn't chosen, I would say. How dare you? Now, let's look at how popular this expression was in 2019. Now, this is a chart. This is a statistics released by Oxford Dictionaries. Between September 2018 to September 2019, climate emergency has the frequency of has a 10,796% of increase in the frequency of use. So actually, within these 12 months, it experienced more than 10,000% of increase in use. So you see, actually, it is rising. Even in this chart, you don't see what happened after September 2019, but it's still rising afterwards. I guess, of course, it's falling because we have other concerns now. So this is exactly what Word of the Year of Fashionable Language is about. It experienced huge popularity, all right, or it accumulates huge popularity within a kind of short period of time. This one is 1 year. Some fashionable expressions were, actually popular just even for a short period of time. But anyway, fashion is short-lived, so it was extremely popular. So even you were not choosing them, it doesn't mean that you were totally wrong, because as I told you, I intended to confuse you. Now let's go back to this slide and look at the other 4 choices. They are not winners, but they also receive a lot of recognition. B and C, the whistleblowers and Hong Kong protesters, were actually shortlisted by Time magazine as a Persons of the Year last year. So they are very famous and they really are very important last year. And D, exonerate, was actually the word of the year of another online dictionary. All right. Now, if you want to know the source of this chart, you can actually go to, because one of you is asking me a question, you want to know the source of this chart, and actually it is from Oxford Dictionary website. You can see the website here. All right. Let's go back to that one. And exonerate, as I said, is actually the word of the year of another online magazine. And how dare you? A lot of you also picked how dare you because it is actually related to climate emergency. So you also have the same line of thought, and it is famous, a famous quote by Greta Thunberg. Yeah, great. Now, after giving you the features of fashionable expressions, based on local Cantonese fashionable language and international English fashionable language, we should look at the reasons behind this language revolution. So the second part of the lecture today is about who and what is behind the language fashion. But before that, actually, I missed one question. I really want to go back to that, which is that now we only talked about the word of the year of 2019, that means last year. What about this year's 2020's word of the year? Of course, we are only at the beginning of this year. We're only at not beginning, but the first half of 2020. But definitely we've been through a lot already. We've experienced a lot. And actually, it seems that the whole world has experienced very similar things in the world. So what I want you to do is to give me a word, suggest a word, or an expression in the live event chat room, and I can see a lot of answers coming up, and give me an expression or a word which you think may become the word of the year 2020. Now, I don't have tips for you because I don't know. I think you really have to check it out at the end of this year, but please give some suggestions now. Of course, I guess most of you are from Hong Kong, and that is why you may still think about the situation in Hong Kong. But how about the world? How about the world? Yeah. Now, what are we experiencing as a member of this world? Or maybe is there any other items that you're always fighting for in order to survive these days? Think about that now. I actually can see a lot of interesting comments now. As expected, coronavirus, coronavirus, and coronavirus, and coronavirus. So it seems that my computer system is full of coronavirus now. And then we also have something relevant, which is COVID or COVID-19, very specific COVID-19. Yeah. And I like that. One of you said Wuhan, and one of you said 2 boxes, please. Boxes of what? Obviously 2 boxes of masks, maybe. What else? Coronavirus, stay home, stay safe, quarantine. It is another very popular word now. Pandemic, which is actually a word which is not new but quite new. I mean, this concept is not new, but we learned a lot about pandemic this year. Quarantine, Wuhan pandemic, COVID, and right now we have a lot of them. Maybe I can give you 5 more seconds and so I enter your last suggestions, and I am going back to my slides. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, it seems that obviously now most of you are choosing coronavirus, and please check it out at the end of this year. But even if you're not choosing coronavirus, it seems that most of you have the same line of thought. You're thinking about this illness, you're thinking about this pandemic, and that is why anything related, I can see all the suggestions are related to this pandemic. I hope that everything will be fine tomorrow. Well, it may be a dream only. Now, right. After talking about the features of fashionable expressions based on local Hong Kong Cantonese and English, which is the international language, let's have the final section of today, which is the the driving force behind this language revolution, or the driving force behind the language fashion? First of all, definitely, the social media and mass media play a crucial role. Particularly, we are always staying home, we're working from home, studying from home. We are immersed in the social media and mass media. And basically, when we read a lot of posts and articles online, and the items of fashionable expressions used in the social media and mass media are also influencing the way we communicate. And those expressions naturally and unconsciously enter our daily conversation. And we are also producing them, using them when we speak as well. And that's why they actually are in our language already. So the mass media and social media play a very important role. And particularly for young people, you don't want to sound outdated. You don't want to sound old-fashioned. And that is why if everyone is using a particular fashionable word, first of all, you have to make sure that you understand them. And second, you have to make sure that you are using them so that you sound cool in front of your friends. And that is why wanting to sound cool and trying to sound cool is the first reason. And that is why we learn a lot from the social media and mass media. Second, the second reason is us, human beings. Human beings have an in-group mentality. We always want to be in a group. We always want to be included and accepted by other people. That is why we try to behave in a way which is similar to our friends, our other members in the same organization, so that we don't have to be different. We avoid being different. We avoid being the odd one out. And actually, the story is quite long here, because after being accepted by a group, after gaining acceptance, we also want to gain more power. And after gaining power, we can influence other people in the same group. And of course, if you have great influence, you can get some benefits. And that is why this in-group mentality is more than gaining acceptance into a group, but it's also a strategy, a method to gain power, exert influence, and also gain benefits as well. And lastly, before I finish the presentation today, I would like to introduce to you one theory which can explain our tendency to use fashionable expressions, which is George Sipp's principle of least effort, PLE, popularized by this scholar in 1949. And principle of least effort states that human beings desire to solve problems with least effort and time. Time is limited and time is money is what we say. And I would say, I am lazy. Human beings are kind of lazy, well, I am at least. And of course, we want to achieve the greatest goal with shortest time and least effort. One of the methods of achieving this is to use words, expressions which are popular and commonly understood by other people. And also, we tend to simplify our speech in order to save the time which we may have to spend on explanation and elaboration. So in order to save time, in order to get our message through as soon as possible, we use fashionable expressions which are extremely conveniently conveying our meaning to our peers. And as you can see in the examples I showed you before, usually, not all, but usually fashionable expressions are shorter than the original expressions. For example, TG, tear gas, and we have a short form called work from home, WFH, work from home. And of course, you have repudiate, for example, as a word of the year, the combination of refute and repudiate. So fashionable language allows us to get messages through within the shortest period of time because they are convenient, they're popular, and they are short. Now, thank you very much for your participation. This is the end of my presentation today, and I do have to thank you for all the responses. You are very active in participation. I'm still looking at them. All right, and now it is a Q&A session. If you would like to know more about the talk of today, and also about PolyU, the Department of English, or anything you want to ask about, PolyU or this talk, you can actually enter your questions in the live Q&A chat room. And then if you want to ask some question or discuss something with me afterwards, after this session, you can also email me, and you can find my email on the slides here. Now let me look at your answers. And yeah, right. Now I have one question about my talk here. Now, one of you ask me or ask us, why are some pop words totally forgotten after a short period of time? All right, now, actually, this is a very good question because it actually goes back to my own research area about fashion. Well, actually, fashion has one very common property. All forms of fashion can be language fashion, can be clothing fashion, or even fashion and technology. There is one very common feature. It has to be new, but it also needs to have the potential to be old and outdated. All right. So, so basically, fashion. Fashion cannot last long. If a fashion lasts too long, it becomes a tradition. So actually, fashion or any fashionable products, fashionable expressions are designed to be short-lived, are designed to be replaced by a new wave of fashion. That is why fashionable language or expressions do not last long, but they have one other property. They have an impact on our vocabulary and on our language, so we're still using them. So this is the feature of fashion. It doesn't last long. All right, thank you for this question. The English literature, you may email me because this is my area as well. Thank you. And all right, now I actually have another question about the use of fashionable language, fashionable expressions in a formal situation. Now, this is another very interesting but challenging question as well. I want you to go back to some of the fashionable, for example, Hong Kong local Cantonese fashionable expressions here. Now, if you refer to these 5 items, I would say they really sound very informal. So usually in interviews, or if you're having a more decent conversation with perhaps your teachers, your I don't know, maybe you're attending an interview, for example, you may not use them. However, for fashionable expressions in English, it seems that we have very decent words. I mean, quite formal, and they sound very well managed. You know, very polite, and very formal as well. So actually, it depends on the meaning that you want to convey, and it depends on the situation where you are using them. If you use a selfie, it is neutral. It's not formal, it's not informal, it's just neutral, because actually selfie is the word we describe that little photo. But of course, if you're emailing your boss, or emailing your teachers, or if you're attending an interview, you may not use this face with tears of joy. Instead, you may say, oh, thank you very much, that is very interesting. So it really depends on the situation. So be careful when you try to use some fashionable expressions. You may think about the formality that you have to observe in that particular situation. Yeah. Now, a very good question here. You are asking me about add oil. Yes, and it seems that this questionnaire is extremely it seems that you know a lot about dictionary. Yes, add oil has already been officially added to dictionary now, and even Gaiyao as well. So yes, actually Hong Kong English has received a lot of recognitions in the past year. And I would say, you're asking whether it is okay for students to use it in classrooms. And I would say this term is actually quite neutral and not formal, not informal, but neutral. So I think it is quite, encouraging as well. So to me, add oil, if people understand it, you can use it in a classroom, and I think it's nothing bad to say that. Yeah. Outdated for period and fashion. Good. Right. Maybe the last question that I can answer, but don't worry. We're going to receive all the questions because we're going to download this chat, and if we have the chance, we are going to reply to your message. Yeah. So let me see. So yeah, right. Now, one participant here asked a question: how do we define the fashion of a language, or how do we define if a thing is fashionable or traditional? How many years? Very good. Now, years. Well, we don't really have a specific duration to define the fashionability, if you allow me to use this word, the fashionability of a word or a thing. It really depends. Now, for example, coronavirus. If it lasts, well, touch wood, if it lasts long, its fashionability will be longer. It will stay in fashion longer. But if it just lasts for 2 months or even 1 week, then of course this term may only last for 1 week. So it really depends on the phenomena or the phenomenon, the situation that word is describing. Coronavirus is a good example. I think the fashion is still there because the coronavirus, the situation is still there. So it depends on the phenomenon and situation it is describing. Good question. Yeah. Right, I'm sorry, time is running short and we have to end this lecture today. And I would really like to thank all of you again for joining, participating in this live broadcast, and particularly those who entered answers, questions in the chat room. Very, very valuable comments, very good answers, and I do enjoy the talk here with you today. So thank you very much. Hello again. Welcome to this additional Q&A session. As we only managed to handle very few questions during the public lecture, I'd like to use the coming 10 minutes to answer more questions. And of course, we indeed received a lot of questions. And that is why I have already combined and reorganized and restructured some questions. And so I hope that most of you can get what you want after this Q&A. Now, the first question is about Chinglish and Hong Kong English expression. Now, the question is about long time no see and add oil. So here it comes. Long time no see and add oil are official entries in reputable dictionaries. Can they be used in formal occasions like interviews and exams? Now, this is a very good question, and actually the two examples given by you are also very helpful in analyzing this phenomenon. Now, actually, I can answer this question in 3 layers. The first one is about the nature of communication. Now, when we communicate using language, we have to make sure that our language is first, appropriate, and second, comprehensible or intelligible. That means we have to use the right language, and we have to make sure that our audience, our listeners, the one who receive our message can understand what we are saying. So these two are the essential elements. And then let's talk about long time no see and add oil. Now, actually, long time no see, first of all, belong to the first category of fashionable expressions. Long time no see and other similar expressions actually have a very long history in language already. They have been in dictionary for a long time and have been used daily by native speakers and a lot of English users already. And actually, most people believe that the origin of long time no see, for example, is from Chinese Pidgin English, while some of them even said that it is from North American Indian dialect. Now, the origin doesn't really matter this much, but the thing is, these expressions like long time no see have a long history already. That means, actually, these expressions have long been understood and even used on a daily basis by the West and by natives in the West and by native speakers and a lot of English users. And therefore, they can be used in any occasion, any situation without a problem because they are neutral, I would say. At least they're not informal, so they are fine. You can use them in any situation. Now, but what about the second type? which is add oil, and some similar new expressions, Hong Kong English expression. Now, add oil and other similar expressions fall into the second category, which is actually relatively new in dictionary. As we know, add oil, for example, has only been added to the dictionary or reputable dictionaries just about 5 or 6 years ago. So actually, even they are official entries in dictionaries, they are not commonly or readily understood or used by most English speakers. Maybe native speakers, if they pay attention to the evolution of word history, they may, or if they know more about Hong Kong, for example, they may know this word. But these expressions are too new, and perhaps most English users are not familiar with them. And therefore, they can still be used, particularly if you're talking to Southeast Asians. Of course, they understand what add oil is. But then if you are talking to other people outside of Southeast Asia, and you try to use similar expressions like to add oil, perhaps you can give them more explanation just in case you have to bridge the communication gap. All right, this is the first one. And the second question is also about formality. And it seems that you're quite concerned about formality, language formality, and which is a good chance for me to explain more. This question is like this. Are there any formal alternatives for fashionable expressions? Now, there is one thing I really have to clarify. In fact, fashionable expressions are not necessarily informal. Fashionable expressions do not mean informal expressions. Now think about the word of the year 2019, climate emergency. Definitely, you can't say climate emergency is informal. At least it is neutral. So in selfie, for example, selfie is a neutral term because it is the only word you can find to represent a type of photo you take for yourself on your cell phone, for example. So climate emergency and selfie, they are not informal. They are neutral, or some of you may think that climate emergency is quite formal. And that is why they can be used in any situation when you want to refer to a particular issue or a particular item. Now, but of course, if you're very concerned about the formality of some fashionable expressions, perhaps you can also use more formal alternatives or more formal or neutral or appropriate synonyms. For example, when you're writing an email to your potential employer or universities, for example, and you want to express something which is funny, then instead of using that very famous emoji, face with tears of joy, perhaps you can use words like hilarious, funny, which is easy, or amusing or uproarious in order to express the same meaning. So once again, fashionable expressions are not informal, but definitely using appropriate language is very important in communication. All right, now the third question is about the length of the language fashion. Now, here it comes. Can a fashionable expression which has become outdated gain popularity again? And how long does each fashion last for? Now, I would like to divide my answer to these two questions actually into two parts. The first one is yes, fashion is revivable, and therefore language fashion is also revivable. That means an expression which was, for example, which was fashionable 10 years ago, may be outdated now already. But then it may possibly gain popularity again sometime later. We don't know when it would be, but possibly it may happen. Now, but definitely we're not sure, because as we know that fashionable language and fashionable expressions are related to a particular phenomenon or an issue or an item. So it really depends whether or not that issue, that phenomenon or that item is popular again. So actually, the language fashion is similar to the popularity of celebrities. It is unpredictable. We don't know how long the popularity of a celebrity will last for. So we actually cannot estimate accurately the duration of a language fashion, as it all depends on the issue of the fashionable expression is related to. So this is my answer to this question. Now, think about climate emergency, for example. It's a very good example. And actually, I'm always using this expression to answer questions because I think you're very familiar with this after public lecture. Now, climate emergency was the word of the year 2019. It was extremely popular last year, but it seems that no one is talking about this anymore now. It is because it seems that the attention of climate emergency has been overtaken by coronavirus or COVID. But then think about that. Without COVID, perhaps we would still be focusing on climate emergency. We would still be looking at what Greta Thunberg was doing. And that is why, once again, whether or not an expression is fashionable is about whether the issue or phenomenon or the object or the item that the expression relates to is fashionable, is popular or not. All right, now, the last question is this one. This is a very good question and basically quite tricky question, but luckily I could still answer it. Now, it is like this. Is the language fashion related to age and generation? Now, my answer to this question is twofold. My first answer is yes, and my second answer is no. So let's talk about the yes part now. Yes, the language fashion is age sensitive and generation sensitive because there is a group of fashionable expressions commonly used by a particular generation within a specific period of time. For example, when I was a teenager, when I was young, I was actually using a group of fashionable expressions which my students nowadays are not using. However, my second part of answer to this question is that actually people belonging to different generations pick up the same new fashionable expressions continuously. So even though the fashionable expression I used 10 years ago are no longer popular now, are no longer fashionable now, I am also picking up new expressions with my students because everyone nowadays is exposed to the mass media and social media. As I mentioned, actually the social media and mass media play a very crucial role in creating this language fashion. So actually we pick up fashionable expressions every day because actually we communicate with everyone. Age, generation is not a communication barrier. That means we will not avoid talking to people who are younger or older than us. And so even the older generation, for example, our grannies, they understand and also use very new and fashionable expressions because they are also exposed to the mass media and they pick these expressions up from the mass media and social media and through the communication with younger people. So that is all for the Q&A here, and I hope that my answers to the 4 questions just now have already quenched your thirst for your knowledge about fashionable expressions. Thank you.